again to discuss things.
Scythe Part 2 here with another episode of Ghouly Gentlemen. Today I'm joined by my good friend Undeadpoolzilla.
Brains.
Something he doesn't have enough of.
Fuck
you. Anyway, yeah, so Deadpoolzilla is joining me for a character discussion here on Horror Month. Deadpoolzilla, what character are we discussing?
Screonk. Godzilla.
Screonk. Godzilla.
That's the sound effect of his roar in the comics. Which I get why they make Screonk the sound effect roar in the comics, because it's really fucking hard to do the roar.
Letterers' nightmares are specific sound effects. So yes, we were talking about Godzilla, and so when you suggested this, I was like, does he count as a horror character? And I think my answer is not really. And I'll explain why I feel that way.
I like that.
Gojira, hold on, let me say. Gojira and Godzilla 84 are, I think, the only movies that I've seen or heard of that actually present Godzilla as a horror character, and most other things that with the character tend to present him more as spectacle. I don't feel like any of his movies shoot him like he's actually scary. They certainly like play with characters in the movie who are afraid of him, but very few things present him as horrific, and more just as, you know, big dumb spectacle, cool explosion kind of stuff.
All right, I would say that Godzilla does count in a horror sense, much like you said with Gojira and 84. That Godzilla, the thing about I think Godzilla counts as a horror character is because he is the horror personified of a nuclear holocaust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I definitely see where you're coming from with that, and that's why I think 54 and 84 is in a number of ways almost a return to tone. I haven't seen Shin Godzilla, and I don't really know how he's presented there, but that could maybe count as well, given what I've heard about the tone.
It's very 84 in tone, but it was very more to criticize that movie was more to criticize the government at the time, because of the tsunami in 2011.
All right. So yeah, the idea of Godzilla as a horror character is something I do have to kind of question, because it's something that kind of happens to all of them, right? Like, part of the reason we got New Nightmare and all these other like reboots or relaunches of the horror characters, like the 80s slasher characters, is because they kind of became campy and silly and goofy, right? What was it? Like Jason X, Jason Goes to Hell. They got just kind of ridiculous, and it wasn't really, no one was really scared of them anymore. No one was scared of Michael Myers by the 13th Halloween movie. And so then they have to go back and reboot the franchise with Rob Zombie, or they have to go back and start over as a proper Halloween 2, like's coming out right now. Like, all these things happen, and so it's kind of like they lose their horror edge and just kind of become camp. And so I think that there's a pretty good argument that that's what happened to Godzilla. It just happened really early on, and so Godzilla is known more for the camp and the spectacle than he is for the connection to the nuclear age and nuclear holocaust. Because like Spider-Man kind of comes to mind for me as kind of a comparison to Godzilla's presentation in connection to the nuclear arms race and stuff.
I would have said more of the Hulk, really.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like Spider-Man, there have been things that have done stuff, I know, in the comics and whatnot with the idea of like the spider biting him as some kind of commentary on genetic engineering, yada, yada, yada. But like, I think most of us can agree the reason that Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider was so that they'd have an excuse for why he has spider-like powers, right? And I feel like Godzilla certainly started much more intentionally as a metaphor for the nuclear age, but I think before that, I think after that, it just kind of became background to the character and not really part of the messaging of the films, if there even was messaging in a lot of his films.
Well, you have to understand that, especially in the original film and in '84, was that Godzilla was a character that was created by the only nation in the world that experienced firsthand, the power of nuclear bombs. And if anything, I kind of compare Godzilla to Frankenstein in the sense that it's a monster born from science unchecked.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think. And to agree that Godzilla in some capacity has been treated more for the camp and spectacle. But I think recently that a lot of people are understanding that Godzilla has a reason to be around, not just to be cool monster, but like people are now I think a lot of people understand now that Godzilla, what he is science unchecked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree. I think that there's definitely an argument that it's there, but I think that things had moved away from that interpretation, that presentation of the character for a long time, because when you said it, I was initially like, I mean, yeah, sure, a giant, 8-story tall monster would be horrifying, but it's just not how it's shot. Like, I remember one day I was watching Final Wars when my nephew was over, and it was just playing like the DVD menu, and it shows like the Godzilla blasting the radiation breath and stuff, and my nephew just goes, cool. And so like Godzilla's got just this, like I don't think I've ever met or heard of anyone who was afraid of Godzilla.
And I think that kind of speaks to the character, doesn't it? That there's a Godzilla for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you like your dark and gritty Godzilla, you've got not just one movie, you've got several movies kind of representing that. If you want giant monster mash movie, there's several of that. If you want kid and campier, big boom spectacle kind of thing, there's movies for those too.
Yeah, I'd agree, but my wider point though is the horror aspect. Like I know people who can't watch Chucky because it just freaks them out. All right, there are people who like have a real hard time with Michael Myers. Steve really gets bothered by Michael Myers, and I don't know anyone who has a hard time watching Godzilla because they're horrified by it. And maybe I just haven't met the people, but so it's weird to me to think of Godzilla as a horror character, even though he kind of fits the bill, is kind of the weird thing. And I guess I'm more talking about the emotions I feel brought up, because horror is supposed to horrify you, and I'm certainly not the target audience for Godzilla, but I certainly don't feel horrified by Godzilla. Even though I do think quite a bit
of what he stands for, I think is the core of it, is that you're more scared of what he represents than the physical thing,
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. We did a Geeky Gentleman History Month last year on The Bomb, and the bomb freaks the fuck out of me. I just did a review of Manhattan Projects on Trade Talk. I'm like, God, no, this is so stupid. Why is Hickman having all this weird sciencey stuff happening? The Manhattan Project was interesting enough on its own.
Now, real quick, The Bomb was the one with that was the documentary on Netflix with William Shatner discussing, right? Narrating.
No.
Oh well.
The bomb was just the discussion of the bomb. There was no central topic.
Oh well. There was on Netflix. I found a documentary on nuclear testing, and it's the most horrifying shit ever.
Yeah, I agree completely. And so that side of Godzilla I find really interesting. But would you agree with me that it is a very limited part of what is actually displayed with the character?
I would say to a degree, but I think in some movies, like I said, 54 and then 84 really represent that. I'd say even in some of the other Heisei films, they represent that. And in GMK, well, maybe not GMK because that's more spiritual than science.
No, it's definitely an interesting discussion though about like where he really fits in, and you know, I did the episode on Tomie with Horror Show Comics, which got like 2,000 views. Thanks, folks. Hi to anyone who subscribed because of that. And there we talked about kind of the difference of horror in Western versus Eastern media, and Godzilla seems to kind of fit this weirder bill where. Yeah, he's a giant monster, but is it really a monster movie? It's like, I hesitate to call a lot of the kaiju movies horror. Just because they have a monster doesn't necessarily mean they're horror. Just because they have a bunch of action doesn't necessarily mean they're an action film, right? They kind of had this weird subgenre all to themselves that kind of defies certain classification, but it ticks a lot of different boxes in a lot of different ways.
Well, I would say if you really want to go by if a kaiju film with a real horror element, I would go definitely Godzilla 84 and Cloverfield. Yeah,
I'd agree with that. So it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting to think about, interesting to talk about with that stuff. But let's go ahead and, we've been on that topic for a while. Let's go ahead and move on to other things about Godzilla. So, do you have a favorite Godzilla design?
My favorite is the Heisei design with the kind of bulky, kind of tank-like look. Like, he just looks physically imposing.
That's fair. I really like the Millennium era stuff, like GMK and Final Wars.
I don't like the GMK movie, but I like the GMK Godzilla design.
The white eyes are, I can take or leave, but I really just like the look of them in those. The Godzilla figure I have fighting Cthulhu on my shelf is from, I want to say, Final Wars.
The GMK, like, design-wise, he just looks like a demon. Like, I know that's what they were going for, but they really nailed that look down.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, that's the thing, is that I really just dig the Heisei era on a whole with that design. Like, when I think Godzilla, I usually think Heisei Godzilla, the Heisei version. When I think of, that's the design I think of.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense. That's the 90s films, right?
Yeah, 84 to 95.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And that's not coincidentally, I'm sure, the era of films you grew up with the most, right?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, there's actually a story, and I think I've told this before, is that there's a reason why I'm so obsessed with Godzilla, and I think I'll share it with you if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
All right, so when I was 2 years old, doctors had discovered there was a blood clot in my heart valve. Okay? I swear this is going to make sense in a minute. Basically, if I had fallen asleep, I would have died. My heart would have slowed down, I would have died. So my dad got this brilliant idea to just show Godzilla 54 and 84 consistently throughout the night until the surgery was ready. So I stayed awake long enough for them to cut me open, fix the blood clot, and yeah, still here. So you can thank Godzilla for DPZ.
No, that's cool.
Yeah,
it's a really cool story. It's interesting the way that like media kind of saves lives sometimes, in weird little examples like that. So thanks for sharing that. All right, what else was Godzilla can we talk about? So 54 and 84 definitely get to the most hard horror part of the character. Do you think that Godzilla is a character that works better as horror, or do you think he works better as spectacle?
I think, like I said before, is that Godzilla can work in any way. As much as I don't like a lot of the later Showa era Godzilla films, with Godzilla's Revenge and all that, you can still make the argument that there's a Godzilla for everybody. And I think that's what makes the character, he's a versatile thing. And yeah, I would love to see more dark horror stuff. And I have a feeling Toho's going to do that when they get the rights back in 2021.
Okay. All right.
They already showed like a very much inkling of that with Shin Godzilla, of making him just this nightmare, this walking nightmare.
Yeah.
But I did. Oh, sorry.
Well, like for me, what I think the most interesting way to write Godzilla is as kind of the force of nature kind of side of horror. I absolutely love the Half-Century War. To me, that's the best piece of Godzilla media I've ever consumed, movie, whatever. And to be fair, I'm not a huge fan of Godzilla, but like that book is incredible. And I feel a big part of why is because it manages to have him be this, kind of inescapable doom, but in a way that doesn't directly connect to the nuclear age kind of thing to the character.
He's very much like this. That comic really hits home that if you lived in that world as old as the character of Ota is, he has this horrible realization that I'm going to be dead and gone for years, and Godzilla is still going to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like he is pretty much Godzilla is pretty much the representation of the Earth's still going to be here long. It's going to be fucked up. The Earth's going to be fucked up, but it's still going to be here long after we're gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I found really interesting about and that is maybe more of a drama / action kind of comic, but it's got some horror elements to it. It's got some like just devastation and anger and angst to it. And I feel like treating him as just that natural inevitability is really, really interesting. And I really, really like that. Kind of making Godzilla more of an existential threat than he is a metaphor for the bomb.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on and talk about... Well, I mentioned my favorite version of the thing. You said you really like the not the Showa, the Heisei era.
Heisei.
What about the character do you think really works there compared to the other eras of film?
I think it works the best because they treat Godzilla. They don't treat Godzilla with kid gloves. Every discussion is about Godzilla and his effect on the world. Every discussion is treated like Godzilla is like this just storm people have to look out for. And considering I live on a state that kind of hangs out waiting for like Mother Nature to play dodgeball with it, I kind of understand that.
Yeah, I see you there. So just the notion of him as a threat and like how the whole world kind of revolves around him, which if a Godzilla-style monster were to actually appear, it fucking would. Not entirely related, but similar. That's one of the things I really like about Pacific Rim. The second fucking giant monsters show up, yeah, the whole world changes.
Yeah, because you're no longer the top of the food chain.
Yeah, stuff like that. I do really like playing with that idea, and just it was interesting because I watched a couple of the Heisei era films. It's interesting to see how the world kind of changed and developed to just cope with Godzilla. Like there's what's it called, G-Force, that's entirely there just to deal with Godzilla. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. And it's like that Godzilla, that version of Godzilla is still he's treated like a credible threat every time. When he makes landfall, everyone just freaks the fuck out.
Yeah. All right. So why don't you take us somewhere?
All right. Let me ask, what's your favorite Godzilla fight?
Oh, sometimes they drag on way too long for me at some points, but I do really enjoy the battle with Ghidorah in it's not GMK. What's the one with the time travel?
That's Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, which is actually incidentally my favorite Godzilla fight as well.
Yeah, I mean it's cool as shit because I don't know, Ghidorah's a fucking weird ass design, and it's interesting to see how Godzilla has to deal with him.
Yeah. It's also one of the most violent fights.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. I'd even say that the following fight with Godzilla and Mecha Ghidorah is equally really awesome.
Yeah, see, to me, I kind of just lump them all in one there. How randomly Mecha Ghidorah comes back, and it's like, fucking really? We're playing the Bill and Ted game with time travel? Okay, fine, whatever.
Because there's a comic I own called Godzilla Oblivion, and it literally follows because the whole comic is centered around a group of people finding a dimension that's ruined by Godzilla and the other kaiju, and they accidentally bring back Ghidorah to their world, and they have to get Godzilla. Godzilla kills Ghidorah, but then, well, Godzilla's around, so now they have to rebuild him as Mecha Ghidorah to fight him. And I'm like,
the antics.
Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. This is literally without the time travel. It's the same goddamn thing.
Yeah, that's what you do. All right. What's the one where Ghidorah transforms into like a hyper evolved state or something? Because I remember that fight's pretty kick-ass.
That's Kaiser Ghidorah from Final Wars.
Okay, yeah, Final Wars. That's it. Yeah, I fucking love that fight too. Final Wars is just kind of like crack though. Yeah, Final Wars is just kind of like crack though for just every fucking monster fight in one movie. And so that's very much appreciated. So like I mentioned, kind of comparing Godzilla to some like the slasher characters and how they kind of became campy, and not to pick on just the slasher characters, but I think the same can be said for a lot of horror icons over time, that that they lose their luster. And so like, you got the classic Universal horror films, but it didn't take too long until like fucking Abbott and Costello were dealing with their asses, right? And it just kind of got camped up, and the image got softened really quickly. And see, that seems to definitely have happened with Godzilla really quickly, and now we're kind of returning back to it. But I wonder if you think that Godzilla's time to be connected to horror has kind of passed, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, about the notion of how to put this, the zeitgeist of horror. Like you look at certain eras of horror, and things are kind of building off one another and playing with different ideas, and then it just, a few years go by and it's not as scary anymore. If the franchise continues, it's trying to recapture what made it scary, but people have kind of moved on. So yeah, it's kind I think the slashers.
Now I just discovered we're getting Happy Death Day 2 and A Quiet Place 2, and I was like, those movies don't need sequels. You got it right the first time.
Yeah. Well, like I tend to think. I think the easiest example to kind of play with this idea is the 80s slasher film, where like, you know, it's 80s, 90s serial killer kind of thing. And I think that made a lot of sense at the time when you look at the culture and what people were afraid of. You go watch like cable news from back in the late 80s into the 90s, and it's like, oh, this serial killer is on the move, or this murder just happened. And like the world was really afraid of someone coming into your house at night and stabbing you to death. And since Godzilla is so connected to the bomb, do you think that like the zeitgeist has moved away from the bomb enough that maybe he can't really recapture that side of it?
Oh, really?
And so to
not living in a world where, you know, the orange guy in the White House might start off a nuclear war? Oh, I don't think that's, you know, the fear of the bomb hasn't gone away.
I really think it has. I don't think people take the bomb as seriously as they should. I'm not trying to say that I don't think the bomb is scary anymore. I think it is. It's something that legitimately terrifies me. But I don't think the zeitgeist of our time is afraid of it like they were in the 50s.
Yeah. I would say that if you want to, like, how I would probably do a Godzilla movie is probably build off of the effect of the after effect of an attack. You know, like, how does the world move on? And, you know, because people tend to kill each other when there's no rules. And I would imagine, especially in our government's time, I just kind of imagine FEMA would just throw up their hands and go, fuck it. This is a no man. This city is a no man's land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that could be interesting. Like, if you have a Godzilla movie that, like, the first 15 minutes is just raw Godzilla destruction, and then he's not in the rest of the fucking movie. It's just the fucking aftermath of dealing with that shit. That could be absolutely fascinating. I'll give you that. So, I don't know, and I'd say, though, if you were to do that, then you're more playing with the idea of Godzilla as a natural disaster, which we've talked about already a bit. And it makes sense. I think the zeitgeist of our time is more afraid of natural disasters as we deal with the effects of global warming. So do you think Godzilla is then a loose metaphor for just disaster or holocaust of some kind that seems to be partially that's out of human control when it happens?
Well, you got to understand that Godzilla was indirectly created by man, and global warming is kind of our problem, so yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting way to look at things, that you can play Godzilla for horror without necessarily having to connect to a zeitgeist that has passed. I could see that, because global warming's going to be a problem for a while, and I imagine there's always going to be something kind of lurking that's kind of bigger than anyone.
Yeah.
And I think that can be an interesting thing to kind of tie Godzilla to, because the bomb is bigger than anyone can imagine. The climate is bigger than anyone can comprehend. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, like I said, Godzilla is, like I said earlier, Godzilla is he is the embodiment of the inevitability that we're finite. He's you know, he, along with the Earth he lives on, is going to be around. May not be the best shape, but it's going to be around long after we're gone.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a pretty good place to end, and just go ahead and go on to recommendations then. So for me, I'm going to recommend Godzilla the Half-Century War. I think that is a very, very good comic. You could read that and not see any other Godzilla thing and be fine, in my opinion. I think it's that good. I'm also going to recommend the 54 film. It's kind of, you know, cemented a place in history. The original Japanese version, not the English release with the American actor whose name escapes me.
Raymond Burr.
Thank you. And then for final thing, just because I like it, Final Wars.
Alright. I'm going to say, because you already suggested, I'm going to say the 84 film. The original Japanese cut, and I do have a soft spot for just kind of the fun that the American cut, the Roger Corman cut has. If you can find any, that is. Godzilla, Godzilla Rulers of Earth, that was the longest running Godzilla comic, and it's, if you want to find like fun smash 'em up spectacle fights, look no further. There's actually a good story to it, and it's actually got some of my other favorite fights from Godzilla in there as well. Like, you had Godzilla fighting the Gargantuas, you had Space Godzilla and Gigan fighting. You had a ton of other fights in there, but yeah, I'd recommend all 6 volumes of Rulers of Earth, and Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. It actually gives Godzilla a story arc.
Yeah,
and actually like a legit character arc for him.
All right, cool. Well, Deadpoolzilla, thanks for joining me.
No problem.
Alrighty. Until next time, we are your ghouly gentlemen. Oh wait, no, I fucked it up. Until next time, I'm the philosopher.
Brains.
And we are your ghouly gentlemen. And we will be discussing things from beyond the grave.
Ha 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 ha!